Welcome dear students, welcome once again to this brief study session. We are going to study with SST, History, chapter number 2, New Kings and Kingdoms of class 7. As the name suggests, New Kings and Kingdoms, we are going to discuss about 7th to 12th century, in midst of which many new kings aroused and who proud several new kingdom, the kingdom or the dynasty you can say. So let's begin chapter number 7, history, chapter number 2 of class 7, New Kings and Kingdoms. Let's see what it is. Several major ruling dynasties or you can say kingdom emerged in different parts of the subcontinent. Here the word subcontinent means in our country, across the world, in every continent, in our continent. Okay, so several major ruling dynasties, many new dynasties, many new kingdoms emerged in different parts of the continent, subcontinent. Now, emergence of new dynasty. Let's see who were the new dynasties, what were the new kingdoms. By the 7th century, there were big landlords or warrior chiefs in different regions of the subcontinent. Actually, what happens, if you visit any village or if you visit any kingdom at that time, there were big landlords. Who were landlords? Those people who have the lands, who were the owners of the land are known as landlords. So these big landlords, or you can say warrior chiefs at that time, you can say Senapati, Mahasenapati or something like that. Those warrior chiefs and landlords were in different regions of the subcontinent. Obviously, they were residing over in different regions of the subcontinent. They were living in different parts of the continent. Existing kings. Now the kings, who were the kings of that kingdom, often acknowledged them as their samantas or subordinates. These kings acknowledge these big landlords or call these big landlords as samantas or their subordinates. Understood? These big landlords were given the names as samantas by the kings ruling over there. Simple. In simple words, in simple terms, if you can say, I can also say that the kings existing at that time during 7th to 12th century used to call big landlords as samantas or their subordinates. Okay, now they were expected to bring gift for their kings and provide them with military support. Now, why king used to call them samantas or their subordinate? Just because of single reason, and the reason is these samantas, these big landlords, used to provide, or they always usually in occasions or at several occasions in different various occasions used to provide their kings gifts. So these samantas used to provide, expected to bring gifts, and they used to give gifts to the kings. Maharaja, it's for you only, like that. They used to give the gifts, and they also provide them with military support. That means they used to provide the kings with manpower so that he can fight the war. Clear? So samantas, kings call big landlords as samantas, and these samantas or subordinates provide king with gifts and sometimes provide them with military support. Simple. As samantas gained wealth and power, they declared themselves as Mahasamanta. Because samantas they were big landlords. In another terms, we can say samantas were big landlords. So these big landlords gained wealth and power. Obviously, they provide military power. That means they have the power. Moreover, they are big landlords. That means they have wealth. Right? So these samantas provide wealth. Because they have wealth and power, they used to start calling themselves as Mahasamantas. king has given them the title as Samantas. They used to call themselves Mahasamantas. Clear? Very simple. It is very much clear up to here. Now let's proceed. As for example, now what happens when Samanta becomes Mahasamanta? See an example. Danti Durga, who was a Rashtrakuta chief, he was a Rashtrakuta chief. He belonged to Rashtrakuta kingdom. Mind you, who? Danti Durga. He overthrew Chalukya overlord. That means he overthrew, he outwitted Chalukya king and performed a ritual known as Hiranyagarbha. See here the word Hiranyagarbha. Garbha means womb. Okay, from where the baby comes out, from woman, and Hiranya means golden. So literally means golden womb. He performed this Danti Durga. He was a Rashtrakuta chief. So he overthrew his Chalukya overlord. Overlord is nothing but the king. He overthrew, he outwitted a Chalukya ruler and performed a ritual known as Hiranyagarbha. He did Hiranyagarbha Yagya, or you can say ritual Hiranyagarbha. Why he has performed Hiranyagarbha? Just to transform himself into Kshatriya. It was done in order to transform one's identity as Kshatriya. In order to become a Kshatriya, in order to become a warrior, he has performed a ritual known as Hiranyagarbha. Clear? Up to here the story is very clear. Why I am telling this thing, Danti Durga? Because it is famous in history. Moreover, if a Samanta becomes Mahasamanta, he was also like a Mahasamanta. Suppose if you become a Mahasamanta, you will have wealth, you will have power, and when you know that I will have the power, I can outwit the king and I will myself become a king. That's why it's a very good example I have set it in front of you. I have given a very good example in front of you. Kings call big landlords as Samantas. What they have done? They call themselves as Mahasamanta just because they have the wealth, they have the power, and they started outwitting the kings and started becoming the king. Clear? Now, the main ruling dynasties, some of the major ruling dynasties at that time. What were the major ruling dynasties in between 7th century to 12th century? The main ruling dynasties were Gurjara Pratiharas. Mind you, these are the some of the famous kingdoms. Note it down. Gurjara Pratiharas, Palas, Rashtrakutas and Chahmanas. These were the ruling dynasties of North India. Mind you, in North India we have Gurjara Pratiharas, Palas, Rashtrakutas, Chahmanas. These are the name of some famous dynasties, kingdom. Now in South India we have Cholas, Pandyas, Chalukyas. These are some of the name of the kingdoms that are in the South India. South India means lower portion of the map. South India where Tamil Nadu is there, Maharashtra is there, Bangalore is there, okay, southern part. Northern part where your Jammu Kashmir is there, okay, top part of the map. The main ruling dynasties over there were Gurjara Pratiharas, Palas, Rashtrakutas. So what were the major ruling kingdoms in between 7th to 12th century in North India, and in South India you'll get the answer over here. Okay, clear? Now, another heading is administration in the kingdoms. How the administration was there during 7th to 12th century. What was the role of a king, or you can say who was at the top position, who was at the lower, who was taking care of what things. This is known as administration. Administration in the kingdoms. King occupies the high position, that is apex. Apex means top position or high position. So king occupies the high position, which is called apex, adopted big titles like Maharaja Adhiraj. As you know, Maharaja Adhiraj, obviously we used to say. Why? Because these are the big titles they take for their own, for themselves. Why? Just because they were at the highest position. Obviously in history you might have learned, this is not a thing to tell you that kings were at the highest position, they were at the top position, they were at the apex. if we call of the administration, or if administration is being taken into concern. High position was taken by kings. Obviously kings were at the top, they took the high position, and they used to take titles like Maharaja Dhiraj and Tribhuvan Chakravarti and something like that. So these are some of the titles which they have took. Okay, now what was the condition of the land? The land was owned by lords. Here lord means ruler or the king only. Okay, land belongs to whom? Lords, kings. Land was owned by lords, and so the producers were forced to pay rent to the owners, whereas traders were to pay revenues to the lords, to the kings. Very simple. As far as administration is concerned, king is at the top position. He occupies the land, he is the owner of the land, and because he is the owner of the land, if you go to somebody's house and if you are occupying his house, you have to pay the rent. In the same way, because the owner of the land were kings, so the producers, that means those who produce the crops, that means peasants and other people, okay, they were forced to pay the rent to the owners, that means to the king, whereas traders were to pay revenues to the lords. That means revenue is also, you can say, tax. Another name of revenue is tax. Traders and producers both have to give the rent and revenues. Okay, clear? Now this is about the administration in the kingdom. Now one more term comes, prasastis and land grants. You have to understand this term very carefully here. What do you mean by the term prasastis? What were land grants? Prasastis tells us how rulers wanted to show themselves as victorious warriors. That means prasastis were nothing but the praise which is written for the kings are prasastis. Okay, and prasastis always tells us, depict the king as victorious warriors, right? So long poems were sometimes written as prasastis in the honor of the king, right? So prasastis tells us, from the history we got to know that these prasastis tells us how the rulers were always showing themselves as victorious warriors, as victorious rulers. And the king usually reward brahmanas by giving land. See, this is the meaning of land grants. The king reward Brahmins by giving land. They used to give Brahmins the land. Okay, I am happy. So come and take these 2 acres, take these 4 acres, take these 5 yards, something like that. So kings used to reward Brahmins by giving land. And these were recorded on copper plates. Copper plates were there on which it was recorded that such and such land from here to here, almost 2 acres, 15 acres, is being provided by king to somebody. Okay, so these were recorded on copper plates given to those who receive the land, those who take the land, those Brahmins who take the land. They used to take that copper plates on which it was recorded. Okay, clear? Right. This is prasastis and land grants. So on those copper plates also, if it is written that this land has been given by king to somebody, it's obviously a praise for the king that I am Dani, I am Mahadani, something like that. Okay, clear? This was about the prasastis and the land grants. Now, warfare for wealth. As the name suggests, war. War means fighting war, struggling. Okay, so kings were often fighting the wars. They were doing the quarrel. Okay, what for? Just for wealth. For centuries, Gurjara Pratiharas, Rashtrakutas and Pala dynasties fought for the control over Kannauj. Now, this is a very famous battle which I am talking about. This was the battle, tripartite struggle. Okay, this is very famous in history. I am gonna tell you. For centuries, that means for over longer period of time, three dynasties, mind you, three dynasties here. Gurjara Pratiharas, Rashtrakutas and Palas. They struggle, they keep on fighting with each other for longer period of time. It was nothing, it was to control the Kannauj. Just to control the Kannauj, these three dynasties kept themselves, struggling themselves, kept in war with each other for longer period of time. This long drawn conflict is known as tripartite struggle. Why? It is known as tripartite struggle. Tri means three. So, as three parties were involved, because three parties were involved in such war, that's why this long drawn conflict, this long war is known as tripartite struggle. Okay, who were the three kingdoms? The Rashtrakutas, the Palas and the Gurjara Pratiharas. Now, this is about our tripartite struggle. Now, coming on to another section, these are some of the facts that we have got to know, that Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni raided subcontinent, raided our country 17 times between 1000 AD to 1025 AD. In between 1000 AD to 1025 AD, this Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni, who is very famous in history, mind you, he has raided our subcontinent 17 times, mind you. Okay, why he raided our continent? To rob the wealth of India. Okay, to loot, to plunder the wealth of India. That's why he has raided our continent. Now, Cholas, we have to read about this famous kingdom, the Cholas. These were from the southern dynasty, mind you, right? South. Who were the kingdoms, famous kingdoms of the south? Cholas. The Cholas were from a very small family of Uraiyur. See, as the name suggests, these Cholas were from a very small family. What was the name of the family? Uraiyur. As the name suggests, it is from South India, Uraiyur. Right? So, Cholas were from a very small family of Uraiyur. Who were Cholas? They were the successors of Vijayalaya. This is the name of the king whose descendants were Cholas. That means he is the king. The successors of Vijayalaya were the Cholas. Okay, conquered neighboring regions and kingdom grew in size and power, because this king Vijayalaya conquered many areas and keep on taking control over distant far-flung areas also. So this king grew in power and finally Cholas came into power. Okay, the famous kings of Chola Empire were Raja I, who was considered the most powerful Chola ruler, mind you, Raja I. Always remember this name, because question may be asked, who is the most powerful Chola ruler? Who was considered as the most powerful Chola ruler? It's Raja I, and his son Rajendra I, who conquered Sri Lanka and countries of Southeast Asia. Mind you, these are very famous things that I am telling you. Be very serious about all these points. All these points I have taken out from history after making too much efforts, because it's not an easy task to continue on with the history in points and all these things. All these points are very necessary. Note it down, make it a point, everyone. Raja I, the most powerful Chola ruler, okay, and his son Rajendra I, he was also a powerful ruler of Chola kingdom who conquered Sri Lanka and countries of Southeast Asia. Okay, clear? Now, the resources. Now the kings who used to fight the war, when they used to fight the war, they used to earn wealth. Moreover, those producers, mind you, sometimes before I have told you, the producers, the traders used to give the revenues, right? Those were also a source of wealth. So these resources were used to finance the establishment of the king. These resources are being used for the establishment of the king. Construction of temples. These wealth are used for construction of temples also, and forts, and also for fighting wars, which were also done to expand the resources. they used to expand their resources. They were often in a habit of constructing temples. They used to take these resources for themselves also, for establishment of themselves. So these are some of the areas where they need to invest their resources or wealth, where they use the wealth for construction of temples, forts, and for fighting up of wars and to establish themselves. Clear? Now, Prashastis were composed by learned Brahmans in praise of rulers. I have already told you what were Prashastis. The praise written in the favor of ruler or the king. So Prashastis were composed, they were made by learned Brahmans in praise of rulers. Now, one example of it, Kalhan's long poem. Kalhan was the name of a poet. His long poem in Sanskrit recorded the history of kings who ruled over Kashmir. Those kings who ruled over Kashmir, their praise or their prasastis were written in the form of a long poem by a very famous person, Kalhan. Okay, he was a poet. Al-Baruni's Kitab Al-Hind. So Al-Baruni's Kitab, book Al-Hind, an Arabic work. It is written in Arabic language. Okay, written on request of Sultan, is an important source for historians. Sultan, king. So this is also an example. Al-Baruni's Kitab Al-Hind, which was an Arabic work, that means which is written in Arab language, is also written on request of Sultan. So king has ordered him to write a book to praise himself. It is also an important source of historians. From where I am getting all these points that such and such things has happened in the south, Cholas were ruling or something like that, just because of these sources. Sources in the form of book, sources in the form of coins, sources in the form of inscriptions, something. Prithviraj III, who was a very famous ruler. From 1168 to 1192 was his session. That means from 1168 to 1192 he was surviving. Who defeated an Afghan ruler. Now he was the famous king who defeated the Afghan ruler Sultan Muhammad Ghori in the year 1191, but lost to him the very next year in the year 1192. Was most popular of Shahmanaz. One famous name of Shahmanaz king was Prithviraj III. Mind you, it is Prithviraj III, it was not Prithviraj Chauhan, it was Prithviraj III. Okay, who was Shahmanaz ruler. Okay, so he defeated Afghan ruler in the year 1191, but lost to him in the very next year, in the year 1192. So we get these sources, we get these incidences from the books being written by famous poets, by famous writers and all these people. Okay. Splendid temples and bronze sculpture. Now under this heading, Chola temples became the center of settlement. It was the temples being built by Chola kings. So Chola temples, they were the center of settlement. People used to live around it. People used to live at that place, at that positions. These were centers of craft production. Moreover, these are the centers of craft production, where craft is being made. Okay, temples were endowed with land by rulers. King used to give the land for the temples as well as by others. If other peoples were interested, big landlords or some other people, they can also give the land for the temples. The produce of this land went into maintaining all specialists who work at temple and nearby. Now the resources or the products or the wealth that will be produced from the lands, they were used to maintain the specialists who used to live over there near the temples, like priests, okay, garland maker who used to make flower garlands, mala, okay, cooks, sweeper. These people used to live around the temples, and all these their expenditure were taken from these produce of the land. They were not only the place of worship. These temples are not only the place of worship, but were the hub of economic, social and cultural life. Question will be asked, why the temples or the temples were known as the hub of economic, social and cultural life, just because peoples used to live nearby temples, and the produce of the land used to maintain the specialists who work at the temple and nearby, like priests, garland makers, herb sweepers and other people. Okay. The making of bronze images of deities, time again this word is coming, means goddess, mind you, goddesses. Okay, so the making of bronze images of deities was most distinctive of the craft associated with temple. In temple, usually it was associated with distinct form of craft. Art and craft were always being flourishing around temples and in the temples. Now agriculture and irrigation. During 6th century, areas or parts of Tamil Nadu opened up for large scale cultivation. Here cultivation, if you want to do the cultivation, suppose if there is a forest, obviously you clear up the land and you start cultivating, you start agriculture. The same thing is written over here. Forest cleared, land labeled, embankments built, chabutra, platform being raised to certain extent, that is known as embankments. It is built to prevent flood and canals constructed. Canals were also constructed. So here how we are describing the agriculture got started, okay, in the south. Moreover, a variety of methods were used for irrigation. A variety of methods were used for irrigation. Here the topic is agriculture and irrigation. Agriculture started by clearing up a forest, embankments were made, lands were labeled by these processes. Irrigation, what were the facilities? A variety of methods were used for irrigation. In some areas wells are dug, wells are used for irrigation. Now in some areas tanks were constructed, right, to collect the rainwater. Tanks were constructed, a collecting house, okay, where water is being stored and later on it will be used for irrigation of fields. Okay, clear? Simple idea, simple meaning of agriculture and irrigation which were being used. Whatever the irrigation method we are using right now, they were also using the irrigation method like this only. Now the administration of the empire. Settlements of peasants known as Ur. See, wherever these peasant means farmer, always remember, peasant means farmer. Peasant settlements, that means wherever the peasants used to live, they used to call that as Ur. Ur means village in simple terms. Okay, so settlements of peasants known as Ur, and a group of such villages Nadu. That's why Tamil Nadu, group of villages. Okay, so settlements of peasants known as Ur. Ur means village. Okay, wherever the peasants are living, they were known as Ur, that is known as village, and group of such villages are known as Nadu at that time. Okay. Inscriptions from Uttarameru in Chingleput district of Tamil Nadu tells us the way in which Sabha was organized. This was one important characteristic of administration in villages. Sabhas were organized. Committee of people, Sabha. Yes, that is Hindi term also. Sabha was organized. From where do we get the source that these sabhas were being organized during those times? From an inscription, hard engravings on the rock, on the walls, which was written. We get these evidences from an inscription from Uttarameru in Chingleput district. Okay, in Uttarameru in Chingleput district, we have that inscription which was written clearly that Sabha was organized over there, and there were separate committees to look after different works like that of irrigation, temples, etc. Separate committees are being made. Separate committees means different committees are being made in Sabha. In Sabha, if you want to become a member, you have to give your names, fold it up, put it inside an earthen pot. One boy used to come, he used to pick up the chit, whosever name is there, he will be the member of committee. So committee was also a question of honor. Becoming a member of committee was a question of honor in fact. Okay, so these committees were made, and these committees, these Sabha, used to look after different works like that of irrigation, temples and all those things. This was about the administration at that time. Now if I am going to talk about important term, because the chapter was somewhat long, but only one term was there, which is Sultan, which means an Arabic term meaning ruler. If the question will be asked, define the term sultan, you have to give ruler. Sultan means ruler and Arabic term means ruler. This is the thing about this chapter, New Kings and Kingdoms. So we have learned a hell lot of things like what were the kingdoms that arose in northern India, what were the kingdoms, what were the dynasties of the South India. Now who were the famous, some of the kings, what they have done, and all these things. So this is all about New Kings and Kingdoms. Moreover, we have learnt about administration part also, administration, how king, what position is being occupied by king. They were at the top, apex position, something. So if you keep on revising on the things, these points, I don't think there will be any problems with you. Okay, so thank you for the next part. Later on we are going to discuss again another thing, either civics or geography. Till then, have a nice day.